Alright fellas, so now we're at question number 9. So Jake is waiting at a pedestrian crossing, waiting for pedestrian to cross. As the signal went, he walked across the road to the left to observe the road ahead. And as the road appeared to be getting thinner and further into the distance, he looked. That is linear perspective, A. The depth cube. Next bit is relating to size constancy. So this bit, no, the car did not increase in size. Philip experiences, I'm not sure why Philip is there, but anyway, Jake or Philip, whatever you want, experiences size constancy where he understands that even though an object casts a different size in his radar, it does not change its size. Just checking, yeah, it is Jake, alright. Not sure why we've got Philip in there, but you guys have got it, I'm sure. Next bit here, what is meant by the term perceptual set? Give an example. Tendency to perceive a stimulus in a certain way, 1 mark. And then, so the definition there, 1 mark. Example and explanation of that example was worth a mark each. So you could have related it to our experiment, our snakes experiment, or you could have made up another one. Either way, that would have got you the 3 marks if you were able to do all of those 3 things. Next bit, Mrs. Smith is starting the school year with a new maths class. She notices that many of the students in her class are very negative towards learning math. So, interesting. She wants to change this and facilitate the development of more positive attitude in her students. So, let's have a look at the first bit here. What characteristics would Mrs. Smith's students be displaying in order for her to draw this conclusion? So you'd be thinking about attitude, the ABCs of related to attitude here. So affective, I don't like maths. Behavioural, I don't do much work in class or at home. Cognitive, it's too hard. The ABC model, and you get 1 mark for each of those, hence why it was worth 3 marks, A. 3 strategies you could have used. So you could have used operant conditioning, classical conditioning, social learning, repeated exposure. Any 3 of those would have done the job. And then choose 2 factors you have mentioned above and explain how Mrs. Smith could have used them. So then you're getting an option to choose 2 of the above, the ones that you mentioned above, and explain what, how they might have worked. So, you know, the explanations are there. I'm sure you guys can pause this video and have a look and compare how your answer might have looked in relation to the one that you picked. And you can sort of work out the marks based on that. So it's a 4 mark question there. 1 for, I guess, giving your explanation of that learning style, and then explaining it with an example or something of the like. Going down to the next question, explain the differences between a stereotype, prejudice and discrimination. Provide an example of each. So you needed to, that to me, 6 mark question. 1 mark for correct component and matching explanation. 1 mark for example. So being able to explain the difference. You've got stereotype is beliefs we possess about a person or people who belong to a certain group regardless of individual differences among that group. So of course an example might be relating to race. You might hold a stereotype relating to Caucasians, Asian people, whatever. And then of course discrimination is the behavioural component. Can be either positive or negative, and it's active behavioural component of the component model of attitudes, and of course the cognitive would be holding a negative attitude towards a member of a group based solely on their membership. That's a prejudice. So 1 mark for each correct component and matching explanation, and 1 mark for an example. So it doesn't really matter what your example is there. As long as it makes sense and is actually relevant to the what is correct relating to the particular stereotype, prejudice, or discrimination that you're explaining. So, in the case of Kitty Genovese, next question, and we put on the exam a little explanation. Here's the actual exam. We put a little explanation for you guys to explain the Kitty Genovese case. A woman murdered in the middle of a New York street while people listened and watched on from their apartments, just in case you forgot. But how did you need to explain here how the diffusion of responsibility affected the bystander's willingness to help? So the answer to that, two-mark question. You got 1 mark for the link to the case and 1 mark for a correct explanation. So you had to relate it back to the case. And here's a little example here. Those who witnessed the act were aware that their neighbours could also see the assault, and so none acted. Basically, the diffusion of responsibility led to everyone feeling like they didn't have to act, but somebody else should do it, rather than alone where they feel like it's all on them if they don't act. The responsibility is solely on their shoulders to help out. So that one's not such a difficult question. Then provide 3 effects of cyberbullying on those who are victims of this behaviour. So I reckon you should be able to list them regardless of whether you've done the course or not. Abuse of drugs or alcohol, skipped school, received poor grades, etc., etc. Any that made sense relating to that were given marks. And the final component there is in Bardo's prison experiment, the guards were dressed in uniforms and sunglasses. Why was it designed that way? 2 marks. So increasing anonymity or de-individuation is one bit there, and it led to them the impact. So that's the reason why, and it led to them acting more aggressively towards the prisoners because they felt like they weren't actually individuals. They were conforming to their particular role and losing that individual identity they had. So that's that for the Unit 2 answers. I'm now going to open up the extended response and go through that. Okay, so here we are with the extended response section, and you've been given the scenario of a Year 11 class wish to investigate whether or not students demonstrate altruism in their schoolyard. During class time, they scatter rubbish within the Year 7 area. During the course of lunchtime, they record and observe how many students walk past and ignore the rubbish and how many students put the rubbish in the bin. So the amount of students that entered the area were 82 and 15 picked up rubbish. Geez, that's pretty good numbers. If it was Marcelin, I reckon it'd be 82 students entering the area and 0 picking up rubbish. That's not backed up by any solid study, but just purely anecdotal evidence that I've witnessed throughout my time at Marcelin. You boys maybe can lift and get this the culture changing within the school. That's by the by though. Question 1, you needed to identify the IV and the DV. And you can see IV is a situation where help was required by putting rubbish in the yard. That's the situation which the students varied, so they put the rubbish in the yard. And then the dependent variable which they measured was how many people picked up the rubbish. So that's a mark each there. Question 2 related to creating a graph to demonstrate or to show the data, and I put a rough guide there of how the graph was marked. So you needed to correctly label the X and Y axis and provide a title. You needed to choose the correct bar aligned graph to show the data, and you needed to correctly display the data 2 marks. So you had to sort of make sure that it was easy to read and easy to understand. Question 3 there, convenient sample is the answer. No participants were allocated into groups. 2 marks once again. And question 4, you got 1 mark for the particular heading here, confidentiality, voluntary participation, informed consent. So we're talking about ethical considerations or participant rights here. So you got 1 mark for explaining it and 1 mark, 1 mark for the particular right, and then explaining it. So that was a total of 6 marks, I believe. So I hope that all makes sense, boys. As you've gone through, I'm hoping that you've made notes or put asterisks next to areas where you're feeling like maybe you were unfairly marked. It's certainly a good way to keep you engaged in the process of reviewing an exam, I find. And I'm happy to go through as you sort of find your answers or find areas where you think you deserve more marks or less marks if you want to volunteer that. That's a little bit stupid, but I don't think I'll get anyone doing that. But if you want to do that, you're more than welcome to as well. But please just make sure that you're checking through and you're learning where you made your errors, and then reflecting on that later to ensure that it's not just a mark that you dismiss, that it's an experience that you learn from and use to help you revise for next year's exams.